Good evening and Happy New Year, Hag Sameach, and welcome to the fourth JCLP President's Forum meeting. I am Marcia Storch, formerly of Congregation B'nai Israel in Olean, New York, and currently Shir Shalom in Gainesville, Florida. On behalf of my co-chairs, Sam Bernstein and Ann Teitelbaum, member of the JCLP board and a member of Temple Beth El of Jefferson, Missouri, and Sam is a member of Newcastle, Pennsylvania, we appreciate you being here tonight. Tonight's program will focus on the historic preservation, how small congregations honor their glorious past. We have a very full agenda covering a range of issues that are relevant to many small congregations. Our program will include presentations from national and local Jewish archives and 2 congregations. Each presentation will be about 5 minutes so that we will have time to hear from you. Our program should conclude by 8:15 Eastern Time. I encourage you to post comments and questions in the chat. We will mute everyone. The presenters will unmute before speaking. And without further ado, we will start our program. I am pleased to call on Dr. Dana Herman, Director of Research and Collections at the Jacob Rader Marcus Center of the American Jewish Archives in Cincinnati, Ohio. The American Jewish Archives has the largest Jewish archival collection in the United States and is second in the world after the Jewish Archives in Israel. Dana is a member of the JCLP Board of Directors. She is available to consult with your congregations about your archival needs. Thank you, Dana, for being with us this evening, and say hi to Harry and Libby.
No, I will.
My grandson and Harry and Libby are friends.
Those are my 6-year-old twins.
Okay, Dana, it's your time.
All right, but I just want to make a clarification. Noah, you had said that I have 15 minutes. Is that right? Okay. So I'm going to share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, great. All right. Thank you, Noah, Marcia, and Sam, and everyone on the board of JCLP for inviting me to speak to you all this evening about the American Jewish Archives and about historic preservation. Can everyone hear me all right? Yes, great. It's been a privilege to work with JCLP these last several years as I see its mission and its work so closely aligned with that of the American Jewish Archives. And because really the function and importance of the synagogue in American Jewish life is really at the core of what we both do. And I think that will become even clearer to everyone on the call tonight by the end of my presentation. You'll understand how that is. My title has changed since July 1st. I'm now the Associate Director of the American Jewish Archives, no longer Director of Research and Collections. I have been at the AJA for over 15 years now, and my position has expanded so that now I'm overseeing the archives and really focusing on the archives and publications. I think the AJA's founder, Dr. Jacob Rader Marcus, if he were alive today, would be amazed, astounded at what we've accomplished in a mere 75 years of our existence. I just left up my name and my email, phone number, the website, and our hours of operation up on the screen. And I'll repeat the screen at the end of the presentation for those of you who want to take down that information. The AJA is one of 2 national Jewish archives, as Marcia mentioned, preserving the history of the American Jewish community from its beginnings to the present day. The other archive being the American Jewish Historical Society in New York City at the Center for Jewish History. The AJA collects the records of American Jews, organizations, and congregations of all denominations that have made a historical impact locally, nationally, and internationally. Among our largest holdings are the collections of B'nai B'rith International, the World Jewish Congress, the American Jewish Committee, the Mandel Foundation, Hillel International. These are, I'm sure, organizations you've heard of. The AJA is also the official repository for the records of the Reform movement, as we are on the campus of the Reform Seminary here in Cincinnati. So the records of the College Institute itself, the Central Conference of American Rabbis, the Union for Reform Judaism, the World Union for Progressive Judaism, Religious Action Center, the Women of Reform Judaism, and so on and so forth, including the summer camps, the Reform summer camps, and NIFTY, and all of the different regional branches of these organizations. As the PowerPoint screen suggests, we receive over 350 new collections a year, and that ranges in size. Some collections are 50, 60, 100 boxes of material, and other collections are just a box or a folder's worth of material. We eagerly and actively encourage the use of our materials. So people, if they can't come to Cincinnati, we will work with people via distance, email, phone, to help people around the world gain access to our collections. More and more of our collections are being digitized and made available for free on our website and catalog. And this is just one example of a digitized collection that we've done, and we have this lovely site devoted to the papers of Rabbi Joshua O. Haberman, who was a major rabbi in the Washington area at Washington Hebrew Congregation. Perhaps some of you had heard of him. The Haberman Institute for Jewish Studies is still in existence and still operating. And we worked on developing the site with his family and with Washington Hebrew Congregation. And we can talk about digitizing records later on in the Q&A. Through our programs, exhibits, and symposia, including a synagogue archiving conference that we hold every a few years. The last one we did was in 2017, and our educational initiatives. We work really hard to take our holdings beyond the stacks and use them in creative ways to engage persons and groups on a variety of topics relating to American Jewish history. Through our semi-annual periodical, the American Jewish Archives Journal, which is available for free, and our extensive list of other publications, we're a leader in promoting critical and informed thought and discourse on American society and culture. And as I said, it's available for free, and it goes out to over 6,000 persons and libraries in North America. Finally, we have the Marcus Center's Fellowship Program, a wonderful program that I oversee. Established in 1979, it was founded with the intent of creating a forum where students and scholars of the American Jewish experience could gather to research, discuss, and study their chosen topics. It provides fellows with a wonderful research opportunity to sit in our reading room and to just work on their projects, on their books, on their dissertations, on their documentaries for up to 4 weeks at a time. And to date, we have given out fellowships to over 600 scholars from around the world. So that's really quite an astounding figure. What remains at the core of our institution is really our archive and our one-of-a-kind holdings, the irreplaceable records of American Jewry. From its very beginnings, the AJA has understood the importance of synagogue archives, congregational records, in telling the history of the American Jew. And this is a quote from Dr. Marcus in our journal from 1948. In order to better understand and study the history of American Jewry, we shall have to study its life as a community. American Jewry is a fellowship. This living together of Jews finds its most tangible expression in the religious core, the independent religious congregation. The American Jewish Archives, therefore, will concentrate on the acquisition and study of synagogal minute books, trustees' minutes, financial and cemetery records, charters, constitutions and their amendments, temple dedication and anniversary booklets, and similar literary materials. And we have stuck to that program since our very beginning. Since its founding in 1947 by Jacob Rader Marcus, the American Jewish Archives has been located on the Cincinnati campus of Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion. And for that, we have to thank this gentleman Rabbi Isaac Mayer Wise, one of the main architects of Reform Judaism in America. And I won't spend too long on his biography, but I want to say that it was Wise who came to Cincinnati in the early 1850s, and he was a visionary who did many things, including establishing Hebrew Union College in 1875, which was the first permanent institution of higher Jewish learning in North America. The first class of rabbis were ordained. The first class was ordained in 1883, thus making this year the 140th year of the college institute ordaining rabbis in Cincinnati, Ohio. And Dr. Marcus came here himself as a student in 1911 at the age of 15 and was ordained in the class of 1920. Dr. Marcus's name is synonymous with the Hebrew Union College. Other than brief periods spent traveling and studying in Europe and Palestine, Marcus ultimately spent the bulk of his life teaching at the college. He never left and he never retired. He was a few months shy of his 100th birthday when he died in 1995. He had published more than 300 books and articles on the history of American Jews. He was known as the Dean of American Jewish Historians, as he was the first to begin teaching what was most probably the earliest required university-level course in American Jewish history to the rabbinical students here in Cincinnati. As I said, he established the AJA in 1947 in the aftermath of the Holocaust and the destruction of European Jewish life and learning, when it became clear that the United States would now be one of the centers of diaspora Jewry, and to ensure that its records would be preserved for generations to come. And in many ways, what better place to do this than to establish an archive than here at the seminary, because essentially he taught 7 decades worth of rabbinical students, and they became the emissaries for the archive. He would say to them, you will go out and you will become leaders of these communities, both in the United States and abroad, and you will send back your records, the records of your rabbinate, but also of the congregation and of the communities, and they will be preserved here at the archives. And for many years, his boys, the students on campus, did just that. And of course, the first woman rabbi was ordained here in Cincinnati in 1972, Rabbi Sally Presand. And for decades after, they, both men and women, female and male rabbinical students, continued Dr. Marcus's wishes. After Marcus's death in 1995, Dr. Gary Pizzola became the AJA's executive director, a position he held for over 25 years. He retired this past June and is now executive director emeritus. Under Zola's leadership, the physical home of the American Jewish Archives tripled in size, and it now includes a state-of-the-art repository with 4 floors of compact shelving and a new space for programs and educational outreach. So the image on the bottom screen is what was the original library of the campus that was established in 1911, 1912. The image on the top left is the new part of the archives that was dedicated in 2005. This is just a picture of our repository. You see 1 floor with the compact shelving, and Dr. Zola is on the left with the red hair, and that is Kevin Prophet, our former senior archivist. He was our archivist for 37 years here at the AJA. And he retired at the end of 2017. The crown jewel of the AJA, of course, remains our Barrows Lobelson reading room, found here at the bottom right, and where scholars and researchers come from around the world to use our collection. Emblazoned on the front entrance of the archives are the words of Dr. Marcus, a paraphrase of the famous quote by George Santayana: "A people that is not conscious of its past has no assurance of a future." How does a people become conscious of its past? And first and foremost, it's by documenting and preserving that which has come before. If we are to understand where we came from and where we are going as a community, then we need the raw material, the Stoff, the German Stoff, as Dr. Marcus called it, of history, the original sources. Without an ample supply of the primary source material, researchers find themselves greatly handicapped, and we're all at a loss. The AJA works on a daily basis with scholars and researchers who want to access these original sources. And if we don't have them here at the archives, then we need to know where to find them. And that's why our work with JCLP has been so fruitful and worthwhile to us over these years. And that's where you, the congregations, can help. The material that your synagogue produces and has produced historically is of immeasurable importance to the study and the story of the Jewish community in the United States. And we want to know what you have and how it can be made available. So what I've produced here is just a few practical steps that I talk to people about all the time. I speak to donors on the phone or in person about donating material or about thinking about their congregational records. And these are some points that keep coming up over and over again. Number one is consolidate material. I always tell people, congregations, you've got to bring everything. If everything is if there's material all over the building, then the first thing is to really try to consolidate it and bring it together in one space. Number two is to gain intellectual control over what it is you have. Now that you've consolidated everything, now you can actually go through the boxes and figure out what it is that you have so that you have a better idea of what should be preserved and what not, which goes hand in hand with number three. Decide how much you want or can invest in archiving and cataloging this material. We can talk about this during the Q&A. It is a big investment. It can be a big investment of time and energy, person power to do this. So you have to kind of scale it to what you can do. And that requires conversation, serious conversation. 4, decide what will stay and what will go. And again, that could be in conversation with other people in the congregation, or it can be in conversation with us at the archive or another archive. And you may even want to develop a collection policy going forward to help you limit that which is part of your congregational archive, because it can get out of hand, and especially if you have people from outside the congregation who are bringing their own kind of archival material to the synagogue and kind of giving it to it. So that can be an issue. And number 5, again, consult professionals if you need help. We are always available to congregations around the United States via Zoom, or we can even make sometimes in-person visits, phone calls. We're happy to do whatever we can to be of help. Some years ago, Kevin Prophet produced a little booklet, a little pamphlet called Starting from Scratch, Creating the Synagogue Archive. It's available on our website. I don't know if JCLP has it available as well through its website, but happy to make the PDF available. I even have some hard copies, so I can mail a bunch of them off to you if you're interested. If the congregation feels that it's unable to properly care for its archive, then I strongly urge you to be in touch with us or another archive that would be able to assume that responsibility. And to that end, and this is our website, this is our main page, AmericanJewishArchives.org, and I'm just drawing your attention to the top right-hand corner where it says Donate Archival Records under Search Our Catalog. So it should be quite clear to people visiting our site where to go. And if you click on Donate Archival Records, you will get to this page, which is donating congregational records to the archives. And I think, again, JCLP also has this list available for its members, but we've also made it available on our website. So you can see some of the material that we're interested in collecting. And I see that oral histories are not on this list, but I will certainly put them on the list as they are important items to record and collect for archival purposes. The archives probably has one of the largest collections of synagogue records in the world, and most likely the largest collection of rabbinic papers in the world as well. We take our role very seriously. The AJA is an impressive reminder of our shared past. It gives people a sense of pride and continuity. We are a well-established resource that people and organizations can turn to for guidance and leadership vis-a-vis archives and history. We're a wellspring of scholarship and learning. People who've dealt with us before have always said that We're very patron oriented. We really want to help people. We're very efficient. We're nice. And, I really encourage you to be in touch with us. And if you're in the Cincinnati area, by all means, be in touch, and I'll be happy to give you a tour, because I really feel like stepping into the archive and really seeing the space and meeting us, you'll understand that we love our job and we love what we do here. As a brief addendum, I do also want to point out that I have been involved a little bit with Jewish Gen and their USA Research Division. They've started something the last year called Shul Records of America. And it's a place where mostly genealogists can go to find out more about synagogue records and where people can find synagogue records, because, they're here, there, and everywhere. So I don't know if your congregations are listed in this. It could be. Right now it's growing. They've got 500 synagogues in the United States as part of their collection. And it's really just descriptions, the kind of basic level descriptions of the collections or the synagogues and what's there. But it's really an entry point for finding out more, genealogical archives and how they can be helpful to them. So if you want more information, I'm happy to pass on contact info and things like that. But I just wanted to put it out there that this is something that Jewish genealogists are doing, and they're really excited about this because they understand that synagogue records are so vital to genealogical history, and just to the history of the American Jewish community. So thank you. I'm going to leave it there for now. I think I've spoken enough. And again, my contact information is on the screen for those who would like to be in touch.
Thank you, Dana. I will now call on Eric Lidji, Executive Director of the Rau Jewish Archives of the Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This will be the third year that Eric has presented on the history of small-town Jewish communities to the Western Pennsylvania Small Congregations Initiative. Thank you, Eric, for being with us this evening, and it is your turn.
Thank you, Marcia. I'm very happy to be here tonight. It's nice to see all of you, including some people who are friends of mine from Western Pennsylvania. I see Sam, and I see the Posners, and I thought I saw Irene and Doris as well, and maybe some others who I'm missing. And it's nice to see Dana too, who I haven't seen since before the pandemic. So I'm hoping to make it out to Cincinnati one of these days. So every few months, I get an envelope, a manila envelope from a woman named Carolee Burak. And this envelope always contains small bits of news from her congregation, which is called Beth Israel Center. Beth Israel Center began in 1958 in Pleasant Hills, which is a suburban area south of Pittsburgh. In the mid-1950s, a lot of young Jewish engineers began relocating there to work at some of these big scientific facilities that were opening up. So one was called Bettis Atomic Power Laboratory in West Mifflin, and there was another called the Westinghouse Astronuclear Laboratory in Large, Pennsylvania. And these were engineers who came largely from the New York area. They had no attachment to Western Pennsylvania. And so they made their homes near their jobs, even though there was not a local Jewish community there. And over time, they found each other, and they wanted a place to hang out and to pray and to teach their kids about Jewish life. And so they started a congregation, and because they were all engineers, they built a synagogue, literally built a synagogue, and they maintained Jewish life in this little corner of Western Pennsylvania for 59 years until 2017, when their membership had declined and they formally closed and sold their building and donated about 20 linear feet of records to the Rau Jewish Archives, which is where I work. The Rau Jewish Archives was founded in November of 1988. It was designed to be a central repository for records documenting Jewish life in Western Pennsylvania. We were initially called the Western Pennsylvania Jewish Archives. And if you know anything about Western Pennsylvania, you know that it's a very dispersed Jewish community. So unlike Cleveland, say, where everything is very condensed within one place or a few suburban areas, in Western Pennsylvania, people have lived all over in all sorts of little small towns. So we've always considered ourselves to be a regional institution, and we've always considered ourselves to be serving a Jewish community that extends far beyond the city limits of Pittsburgh. And from the very beginning, we've collected the records of small town congregations throughout Western Pennsylvania. One of the first collections we received of any type came from Denora, Congregation Ohav Shalom, in about 1989 or 1990. And since then, over the subsequent decades, every few years, we would get records from another former Jewish community in one of these small towns throughout the region. So we got the records of Titusville and Rankin and the Beaver Valley. And we also got family collections that were associated with small towns throughout the area. And that was kind of the regular pattern of things. And then around 2013 or 2014, something changed. And we started to notice a large uptick in congregations in our area that were either closing or downsizing or just looking to establish their legacy. And so in response, my predecessor, Susan Melnick, launched the Small Towns Jewish History Project. And her idea was to proactively connect with the small town Jewish congregations and to work collaboratively to care for their records and to preserve their legacies. And that's how I met Noah, was through that work. And we've worked very, very closely over these past 10 years. When we launched this project in 2014, we expected it to last for 1 year. But by the end of that year, we had more than enough work to justify a second year, and then a third and a fourth year. And now we're completing our 10th year on this project. And in that decade, we've collected the records of 22 congregations in Western Pennsylvania, as well as dozens of associated family collections. We've conducted at least 30 oral histories with the current generation of small town Jewish leaders. Sam was one of those oral histories. We have created 61 small town community profiles on our website, and we have many more that we could still do. So it's only scratching the surface. And we've also participated in more than 20 public programs. And in many cases, these programs have occurred in small towns. So it's not just bringing people to Pittsburgh. We drive out to the small towns. And often those audiences include many non-Jewish participants in addition to Jewish ones. As we're reaching the end of the records that we know exist, we're starting to work now on expanding this programming by converting our collections into educational materials that can be taken back into these towns so that we can share the story of small town Jewish life with the people who still live in those towns, regardless of whether they're Jewish or not. Over the past decade, I've driven literally thousands of miles across Western Pennsylvania. I've been to every single part of the region. I've met a wonderful group of people. It's been one of the joys of my professional life to do this work. In fact, today I spent most of the day down in Washington, PA, and Marilyn and I got to hang out and catch up for a little bit, and I got to go to the shul there for a little bit and do some work there as well. So these envelopes that I get every few months from Carolee Burek at Beth Israel Center, they document a congregation that no longer exists in a legal sense, but still very much exists in a communal sense. They include obituaries. There are correspondence between congregants. There are notices about donations that are made using the remaining congregational funds. It's Carolee's way of continuing her role as the congregational historian. And we are touched to be able to preserve the history of this congregation beyond the boundaries of its formal existence. Through her, I've come to have a personal stake in the congregation. And now when members of the congregation pass, I grieve along with the congregation because I've come to know a lot of these people, either in person or through their records. This congregation is not unique. Every single congregation is larger than its membership. There are the members who are what you're worrying about day to day, but there are also former members, and there are the descendants of members, and there are your clergy and your former clergy and their children and grandchildren. And there are historians who are researching local history and regional history and American history and Jewish history and American Jewish history, and an endless list of subjects that go far beyond our imagination. One of the pleasures of working at an archive is that you think you know what the world is interested in, and then researchers come who are interested in things you never thought of before, and they find those things in collections in ways that you never would have expected them to find them. So believe it or not, there are hundreds of people all over the world who have a stake in the history of your congregation, and they are looking for you. But oftentimes they don't know they're looking for you. And oftentimes you don't know they're looking for you. They're looking for a story that's in your records. And the goal is to find a way for them to find you. The best way to do that is to donate your records to an archive. A lot of people think an archive is like a safety deposit box, And in some ways it is. It is intended to protect records and to keep the world out. But I like to think an archive is really more like a lighthouse. It's drawing people in, especially people who are sort of lost at sea in a research sense. Archives really have two purposes. The first is to preserve records, and preservation does require a lot of care and security. But archives have a second mission, which is to make records discoverable and accessible. And they do this through finding aids and catalog records and databases and research assistance and programs and publications and displays and exhibits and fellowships, all the things that Dana mentioned. So when you donate your records to an archive, you really are ensuring that the legacy of your congregation extends around the world and into the future and far, far beyond your immediate reach. So I'm happy to take questions at the end of the program as well. But thank you all for having me tonight.
Well, thank you, Eric. That was very interesting. I now call on Marilyn Posner, past president of Beth Israel Congregation in Washington, Pennsylvania. Marilyn will talk about how her congregation worked with the Rao to preserve their archival collection. Thank you, Marilyn. And you may begin.
Marilyn, unmute yourself.
Oh, I got it. And by the way, it's Posner. It is sad when a congregation comes to the end of its active life. You have your memories, but you want other generations to know that it existed. Finding an appropriate place for the artifacts and records from the congregation to continue to live is important, but taking artwork from the walls, Torahs from the Ark, and records from the synagogue office can feel like vandalism. Don't let that happen to you. Keep thinking of the future generations who may learn of how your congregation offered so much to members and communities. Washington, Pennsylvania's Beth Israel Congregation found that place in the Rao Jewish Archives at the Heinz History Center in Pittsburgh. Specifically, we found its director, Eric Lidgy. To be honest, I began years before with Eric's predecessor, Susan Melnick. Eric has made several trips to us, including today, to see what we had to offer. It took several trips because we are still alive, although our synagogue building has been for sale since before the pandemic. Each time I called Eric to say we were ready to give more items to him, he assured us that he would care for them. That trust between us helped again with dispelling the vandalism feeling. One such visit had Eric looking in drawers, opening closets, and checking the entire building for where some formerly prized possessions had been hidden away for decades. I looked over each piece carefully and decided which we were ready to hand over to Rao and to Eric. Not everything we offered, like the inscribed shovel used to break ground for our building, was accepted. Eric would be happy to take it for its significance, but unfortunately, Heinz only saw it as a shovel. So I have arranged with our local historical society to take it. We have donated prayer books and library books to one public library and 4 colleges and universities so far. Some of them agreed to place book plates in these volumes, saying that it was donated from Beth Israel's collection, keeping our name alive. Some other books went to a prison where a Jewish chaplain said it was difficult for his minyan to get the texts they needed, especially since they have no access to the internet. He also is a chaplain for a Jewish home and for a small congregation. Some of the books may be going there as well. He said the new owners of the Jewish home where he chaplains has kept it kosher, but the new employees have no idea of Jewish recipes. I sent him kosher cookbooks. A good idea, my husband's, was to create a spreadsheet each time I contacted a place that may accept some of our donations or reached a gallery to sell some of our artworks or some other item to be remembered. I included it with the date done, along with contact information and significant things such as the amount of commission from a gallery accepting our artwork. When we started, we gave Rao items for which we had duplicates. our centennial book, pamphlets, newsletters, and other items that showed that we were here and active. I wrote the centennial book in 1991. At the 125th anniversary, I took the boxes of archival files to my house so I could write articles about the past 25 years. That also gave me a chance to clean up the files, put them in order, identify the photos. Actually, what I was doing was making our archives easier for Raul to accept and use. As the years passed into a decade, we realized that Beth Israel's time was growing short. That's when Eric and I began to negotiate on what I could give him for safekeeping without that vandalism feeling. As we grow closer to a possible sale, a Judaica antiques dealer in New York offered to buy some of our religious artifacts. An art gallery and Judaica store opted to take some of our artworks on consignment. One of our members opened a small restaurant and bought our parva dishes, glasses, kitchenware, pots and pans, and small appliances. We had our Shul's Hanukkah party there, and it felt very comfortable with so many of our former items around us. A large silver tray inscribed in honor of the 25th anniversary of a late couple in our shul was given to their 90-year-old son, a member of our board, for him to give to his daughter. A portrait of our first rabbi, who served for 50 years, 1891 to 1941, is being shipped to his great-granddaughter in Massachusetts. I recently met a young woman, Michal Lewin-Epstein, who ironically I had met in our shul when she was a year old, when her parents came from Israel to visit her great aunt, who was a member of our congregation. Michal also was at the dinner table with us in Jerusalem 23 years ago at the home of her grandmother, who grew up in our shul. When Michal's mother-in-law brought Michal's family to our shul for a tour of where Michal's husband's family had prayed, it was a miracle that I figured out our connection. Balm in Gilead, a book on the founding of Hadassah, sat in our shul library and includes stories about Michal's grandparents, great-grandparents, and other relatives in Israel. So I sent it to her in New York, where she now lives. Finding not only homes, but good homes with people who would care for the things that have been treasures to us has been my goal. Keep that in mind when you are sharing your treasures. And I agree with the sentiment of Andrew Carnegie when he said, "My heart is in the work." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thank you so much, Marilyn. That was a lovely, very personal story, and it really was special. At this time, I'm going to call on Toby Brief, Executive Director of the Columbus Jewish Historical Society. Toby has presented to the Ohio Small Congregations Cohort about the importance of preserving historical documents. Now, Toby has recorded her presentation, because she had another commitment at this time. So we're going to listen to Toby Brief.
Good evening. I'm Toby Brief, the Executive Director of the Columbus Jewish Historical Society and the Eleanor G. Yankin Curator of the Historical Collection of CJHS. I do apologize for not being with you tonight live, but I am pleased to have the opportunity to tell you about what we do. CJHS is a regional historical society with a collection that covers a broad segment of central Ohio, extending from Dayton to the eastern border, north beyond Mansfield, and south, especially south and east. And these are all communities that really feel an affinity for the central Ohio area. We accept archival donations from anyone with connections in Jewish communities within this wide region. And our mission is to ensure that the most complete history of our communities is both collected and preserved. We're an organization that collects documents, records, oral history, but we also collect all manner of objects, as you can see behind me. We cover the full breadth of Jewish life, personal and family, religious, social and organizational, and business. Naturally, synagogues are a major component and touch each of these areas. We confer regularly with potential donors as well as with individuals and entities who are working to preserve their own history. We work with congregations, lay leaders, and their staff. We look at the synagogue assets, but we're also looking at the synagogue's connection to its community. So when we talk to synagogues, we like to really focus on the fact that your synagogues hold so much more than you may actually realize. Both the business records and the records of religious life are extremely important. They tell the story of the highs and the lows of congregations. So minutes, programs, records, newsletters, sisterhood and brotherhood filings, youth groups, ritual records, all of these tell the story of your congregation. But also the purchase transaction, the land and the buildings, photos of the congregants at their activities, Sunday school records, Hebrew school records, samples of student work. All of these are really important. And if we're very lucky, there'll be mohel records, bris, marriage, conversion, b'nai mitzvot, cemetery records existing. All of those can and should be preserved. And part of this is that we want people to remember that this is not only for what you know of your synagogue, but for those folks who are searching for family or looking to establish Jewish roots in the future. They're going to need these documents. Too often we find that they've been destroyed or they've been damaged. So we encourage our synagogues, our congregations that we work with, to really look not only at what you're considering an important record, but also those which may become important in the future to somebody else. And often the surprises come as we discover what else you have. CJHS accepts ritual items, but not only because of the synagogue or because of their value as pieces of art, but also in their dedication plaques. That's where we find the history of the families who built your synagogues, as well as who built your community. This is the personal side. And these things can be as grand as Torah crowns, and Torah covers, ner tamids, and things like that. But they can also be simple objects, like that Kiddush cup that's stuck way in the back of your kitchen. And nobody really remembers it, but there's an inscription. That's a historic object and something that we like to encourage you to collect and to preserve. The other aspects of synagogues is that they really do become a repository for the history of more than just the congregation. There are meeting places for Jewish organizations like B'nai B'rith, Hadassah, BDYO. You probably have the brochures, the programs, the minutes that these groups used. Something else you have, when homes are cleared or downsized, when there's no family, a synagogue is where the non-Jewish members of a family could come, and the synagogues often become the recipients of these Jewish items in the home. So it might be family portraits, Bibles, historic objects, and personal papers, which are many of the examples of things that we find. Synagogues also frequently receive lots of correspondence from other congregations, from other civic organizations, local Holocaust recognition ceremonies. Example is in the Mansfield files, we found references to the synagogue and JCC of Tuscarawas County. There is nothing else left of Tuscarawas County. It's disappeared. Synagogues do business with local vendors. Maybe you have a tchotchke, a ruler, a pickle fork. Again, all of these are parts of your community and important things to be preserved. We work with you to actively search out and identify these bits of community that are also part of your congregation's history. We look in your junk drawers, we look under your bimas, we look in the old closets and of course the basements, and we encourage you to do the same. Whether you're considering an imminent change in circumstances, or you're looking at the future, or you simply want to be sure that you are preserving in the best possible location, our institutions are all ready to help you assess what's held, what's of value in your synagogue collection, what may be a part of your community's collection, and how all of these items can be directed when the time arises. So thank you for having me. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Good evening. I'm Toby Brief, the Executive.
Okay, thank you, Toby. I will now call on Paul Hyman, President, and Nancy Scheimer, religious leader of Emmanuel Jacob Congregation in Mansfield, Ohio. They made an extraordinary donation of their historic documents to the Columbus Jewish Historical Society. Okay, Paul and Nancy, your turn.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think there's a written narrative that's going to be shared. I'm really lousy at reading scripts, so I'm just going to go through some points from an outline that I made. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned that I think is important to consider is it doesn't start with the decision to sell your building. It starts years before convincing people that this is coming. And we worked with the Jewish Community Legacy Project to set up a legacy plan, which already put people on edge and convincing them that this was writing a will, not shutting us down. But the advantage to it is when it came time to just sell the building, and our congregation is still continuing, we are not ending as a congregation. We had some of these pieces already in place because of that. We already knew about the Columbus Jewish Historical Society and organizations like that, so that we could activate that part of the plan because it had already been put in place ahead of time. But it was difficult to convince people. I've only been there 20 years. Some of them have been there 60, 70 years from when they were born. And for them, the building is the congregation. And so it's a delicate and slow process of engaging a few key people, whispering in their ear, at some point we may need to sell the building. And that's an important part of it. If some disaster happens and you have to spring it on everybody at once, harder. But once we had that, the actual decision to sell the building was partially COVID. While nobody was there, the roof leaked, mold grew, and also a recognition that we had very few people who were going in the building. That's how come that could happen. And so it became a financial decision as much as anything else. We'd already identified partners in the Columbus Jewish Historical Society. Steve Edelstein of the Jewish Community Legacy Project linked me up with a group called Kulanu, KULANU.org. And they accept religious items that they then transfer to either newly forming or congregations that have shut down but are reemerging. And they do this around the world. So they're working with congregations in Africa, but also in the United States. We sent one of our Torahs to El Paso, Texas. Wasn't that right, Nancy?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah. And so also the one most difficult item to deal with was we had a Holocaust Memorial Torah, which, if you know about those, you do not own them. They are on loan from the Memorial Scrolls Trust. And so we had to contact them and work with them. And luckily, one of our former members who is now in Columbus was able to arrange with his current synagogue to transfer it there. So we did not have to ship it to Great Britain. And so that simplified that. But once we had the partners in place, it became just this, as a couple people have indicated, there was, the congregation opened in 1950s, so there was almost 70 years of stuff hidden in there were things I had never seen in 20 years that suddenly emerged when people looked in all these different cabinets and closets, sets of dishes, and more frying pans for latkes than I knew it could be in one building. And so we divided it up into 3 categories. There were things that we were going to keep because we are continuing and we're looking at new space right now. Totally aside, if you are considering downsizing to a new building and you don't know it, there's an entire architectural part of the building code for religious organizations, you can't just move into a house and remodel it. You need an architect and you need to deal with this part of the building code. If you want it done properly and if you want it done permitted and all that. The only way you cannot deal with this is if you buy a religious building. So that's an aside. We're dealing with that right now. It's a mess. So we decided the things that we were going to keep. Some of our Torahs. 2 of them went to Kalanu, one which was kosher and one which was not, and they are going to repair it. We kept prayer books, some of the furniture, decorations. We identified things that had names on them. Memorial plaques, candlesticks, Torah crowns. I think that crown behind Toby in the video came from our synagogue. And we gave the families first chance if they wanted them. And then everything else that had a name on it, as Toby indicated, went to the Columbus Jewish Historical Society. And we had open houses for people to come if they were local. I spent a lot of time packing memorial plaques. Thank heavens that the post office has a fixed rate box. They don't care how much it weighs. So shipping was not totally crazy, but I shipped out a lot of things to people who couldn't come in, but word of mouth had spread. I sent out emails to the people I could find and encouraged them to tell other people. We had one former congregant in there, and she spent 45 minutes on her cell phone calling people based on the names she kept spotting. Oh, I should call so-and-so. And so I went through that exercise as well. And when we sold the building, suddenly we had 30 days to finish. And so, yeah, that is when we engaged a mover. We set a deadline. People either take it or it goes to the Historical Society. And the memorial plaques, if that question is at me, we took all the individual ones off and let families take them, ship them to families, and everything that was left at the end went to the Jewish Historical Society. So yes, it was a good 4 or 5 hours with half a dozen people with screwdrivers taking these things off and disassembling them. It turns out the entire frame comes apart once you don't have the plaques there to hold it in place. So we learned a few things. Anything else that had names on it, all our business records, we did not have time to go through the business records. We just threw everything in boxes and sent them to Toby. And so we'll let her sort that. We don't have the new building yet. That is the problem. We have been in homes up until for services, and we had the high holidays in one congregant has a converted barn that's now an event space. And so we use that. So once we have a new building, everything is coming out of storage that we kept, except for a few things like the Torahs. We don't put the Torahs in storage. They're in an office that somebody has let us use until then, and a few other things are there. So we are in the middle now of the second process. Second part is finding a new space, remodeling it, and hopefully by next year, maybe, we will be in a new space, smaller, more appropriate for the size of the number of people that we still have. Did you want to add anything, Nancy? I sort of just rambled down there.
No, that's fine. I think you covered all the major points, although at the end of the written report, I kind of identified the challenges. So for any congregation that is looking to the future and thinks it might go through a similar process at some point, these are things that I think we learned, lessons that we learned from our experience. And first of all is the timing, as Paul mentioned. The time to start thinking about this is now, if your congregation has not already, so that it can be done in a timely and orderly way and not kind of end up with documents being thrown into boxes. And weren't thrown, and we did label the boxes so that at least Toby would have some idea of what was in there. But it was not, we were not able to give the care and time to it then that we would have liked to. Finding staff or volunteers to do all of this work, it was a massive job. And actually, I would just correct something Paul said. The building dated from the 1950s. Some of the stuff dated far before that, because it was actually two congregations that had been around for decades that then merged. So we had records going back to the 1920s. So staff volunteers, we found it very difficult. And I think it was partly because of the sadness that a lot of our congregants felt, and just the idea of sitting in one of the rooms there and going through documents with the idea that all of this was going to have to go somewhere was very sobering. Although I did find also that once people they could be persuaded to come and start working on a project, they kind of got into it and were fascinated by the history of it. And so that once you could get past that barrier of they're not wanting to do this, they kind of got into it, some of them. Books. I was interested to hear from Marilyn that you were able to give books to local libraries, and I think you said some universities. We had a terrible time with this. And the bottom line that I was told by many people who deal with getting rid of contents of buildings is that nobody wants books. So that's, again, something we need to be prepared. You need to be prepared for. We ended up basically leaving most of our books, which brings me through the last point, which is we actually were fortunate in that the purchaser of the building was willing to take the building as is, meaning that they agreed that anything that was left in the building they would dispose of. So it was sad, but on the other hand, it made life somewhat easier for us. So unfortunately, that was the reality. But we got through it, and we're still a congregation and looking forward to finding a new space.
Well, thank you, both Nancy and Paul. Some of us have already been in your spot, and some of us will have it to look forward to. So thank you for sharing what happened with you. Okay, that is the end of our presentations. And now, Sam, you are going to deal with questions and answers.
Thank you, Marcia. I'd be remiss if I didn't just take a minute to thank Dana and Eric and Marilyn and Toby and Paul and Nancy. Tremendous presentations, very enlightening, and it certainly makes myself, as well as I'm sure everyone on this call, very proud to be associated with people like this and to take the care and quality that's been shared tonight in the presentation. Now, we're going to honor our commitment to conclude by 8:15, and we do have about 5 minutes at the end that I want to turn things over to Ann to bring some concluding comments. So I have about 2 minutes after 8 right now. Noah, if you're ready, we're going to spend the next 8 minutes on a little bit of Q&A. And if you haven't thought of a question yet from the audience, I'm going to ask Noah to address a few questions that were published in the chat. And Noah, if you can handle those and get those surfaced, then maybe we'll still have a few minutes for Q&A. And, we can always follow up with people afterwards. Like Noah said already, the presentation and all this information is being recorded and can be shared at a later time. But be ready in about 8 minutes. But I was going to turn things over to Noah unless somebody else had a comment.
A number of you have your own connections with local historical societies or archives. We have two hands. I see two hands up. Lynn Diamond, would you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, looking for the mute button. It's in a different place than the one at work.
State which community you're from.
Yes, I'm from Temple B'nai Israel in Kokomo, Indiana. And our closure is probably looming within the next 5 years or so. And we have a legacy plan, which takes care of a lot of the big things, but we still need to take care of a lot of personal items. And one thing I was interested in is someone mentioned that they just looked for things with names on them and gave them to family members. If you're a 501c3, are you not bound by rules that you can't just give things away to people that might have donated them, give them back to families that might have donated them, because that's how I understood it. That could be an issue. Is that something you worried about, or you just kind of went forward?
Dana or Eric, would one of you respond to Lynn?
I've never faced that with yard site plaques.
Right.
I'll be honest, that issue has never come up. It's an interesting question, but I've never had that issue come up.
Neither have I.
Yeah, I was the lucky one that got us through the 501c3. So I remember mentioning it to our IRS guy, and he said, no, you have to sell something for fair market value. So if it seems silly, but I can understand that if someone donates a $50 item, takes a tax write-off from it, and then you give it back to them years later, I see their point. But I was just curious if anyone had any mechanism or had thought about that. But I don't want to take any more time, so I will leave it to the next person.
Okay. Noah, did you have any chat questions or hand
Doug
raising?
Krennick in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Do you want to share the process you went through?
The process we went through is we had many arguments with our congregation as to selling the temple. The older members didn't want to do it. The younger members did because, well, the younger members were in their 60s and 70s, and we were the ones who were the caretakers of the temple. So we did sell the temple. We then moved over to another facility where we had services, and we had rabbis come in from Cincinnati, and then COVID came along, and more members have moved out. So we now have, I think, 7 members left in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and in Marietta, Ohio. So we are now a satellite of Charleston, West Virginia, and we still have stuff. And I've been contacted by a couple of, well, actually, Chabad has contacted me to wanting to buy the Torah, and I'm thinking, well, we'll sell the Torah, and then we'll give the money away. So we have enough money to last us for years because of the sale of the building, and there probably will be nobody here in, say, 5 years. So that's our problem.
Thank you, Doug. Betsy, then Naomi. Betsy from Terre Haute and Naomi from Waterloo. Betsy?
Yeah, just a couple of things. How large is your congregation in Mansfield?
So on paper, we still have maybe 20, 22 families in participation. At High Holidays, we had 20 people in total show up. So,
what about, you said you took the plaques off and gave them to families. Why wouldn't you save those for the new building? And also, do all communities have architectural requirements? Because it's the younger members that want to hold on to the building, and the older members are saying we can't. Our building is over 100 years old, and when you talk about roof leaks, oh yes, we've had those.
So I'm not sure if I think it's state regulations that are the building code. I'm not sure. This was all new to me as we did this.
Because no one's mentioned that to us, because I'm thinking there's lots of buildings and strip malls that we could probably lease or buy.
And probably you could go under the radar if you just want to do a very small remodel. But if you're going to have to engage, get permitting done by the city where you are, they're going to want to see architectural drawings. They're going to want to see, it has to do with things like air exchange capacity, having the number of fire exits. There's a whole bunch of stuff I've never heard of.
We were just yesterday morning told by an architect that we're working with that if a congregation were to buy a building that was already rated as being for assembly, that any upgrades that would be necessary to bring it up to code would not have to be done. They would be grandfathered in until some renovation had to be done for some other reason, and then it would have to meet code. So, for example, if you moved into an old church building and the bathrooms were not ADA compliant, you would not necessarily have to change the bathrooms immediately. But if you ever did work on the bathrooms, then they would have to be ADA compliant.
And in the case of the space we're looking at, it was office space before.
Right.
So clearly a whole change of use. And
Naomi?
Yes, I'm going to give advice on books. While this period of ambivalence occurred, and I'm from Waterloo, Iowa, where people didn't quite know what the next direction is, cataloging the books is a great place to start. It's not threatening to the congregation. And so we've cataloged the books. We had thousands of books. Some were more secular Jewish topics, and then there were the holy books as well. And a recommendation I have, there are a couple of Jewish book vendors who you can reach out to. You don't make a lot of money, but at least you know the book is going to a Jewish home. We also gave some of our less valuable books just away free to our members, as many as they wanted to take. And we finally, we found Goodwill to be a good partner. Goodwill is one of the biggest online sellers of books. So even though there's not a lot of Jews in Waterloo, Iowa anymore, the Waterloo, Iowa Goodwill brought a big truck to take many, many boxes of books, and those can be sold online to people who are interested in Jewish topics all over the world. So those are good things. And plus you can keep your inventory of the books, and that's a historical document. It's fascinating what people collected. So, and a lot of the things that we had in our library were from homes. You know, people obviously were clearing out their own homes, and we got all kinds of interesting things. So just having that inventory is a historic document of what you had that you can share. And so that's my comment, basically.
Sam, do you want me to throw out one of the chat questions?
Yeah, please.
There are two related questions. Could a synagogue become a museum or cultural event space? And what happens to the money when you sell the synagogue? I can answer that briefly because that's what JCLP does. What we do is we help congregations recycle their assets. So if you sell your building and you've taken care of your cemetery and any other issues, and there's money left over, then you have an opportunity to create the kind of legacy endowments that from the monetary, the asset perspective, complements from the archival perspective. You sell your building for $1 million, you take care of your cemetery, you have a few $100,000 left over, you can set up endowments to send kids to camp or just synagogue or to Israel or the local food bank and so on. It's much more regarding the synagogue becoming a museum or a cultural event space. There are congregations that are adamant that they want to preserve the building. There's two elements. Is there enough money in an endowment to take care of the annual expenses of the building? And the second, is there an entity that if there's nobody left in the Jewish community that will be responsible for the oversight and the administration of the building for cultural events or museums and so on. And that's an issue that really kind of transcends today's topic, although we're going to cover that somewhere down the line.
I want to honor our time, and I want to turn things over to Ann Tettelbaum to close out the event, and we can follow up and talk offline in the future. But again, I want to honor our time. But I do want to tell people, if you have money left over after you sell the synagogue, that's what happened in Newcastle with Temple Adar Israel. We worked with the JCLP and we worked with the Jewish Federation of Greater Pittsburgh. We created an endowment, and annually we try to give $4,000 or $5,000 donations a year to needy causes that are Jewish and non-Jewish. and our local, regional, national, and international in focus. We've done that 5 years, $100,000, and we're in the process of doing another $20,000 over the next month. And this is not a paid commercial, but I must say this because of my affiliation with JCLP. JCLP wants to continue to help congregations throughout the United States. And so oftentimes synagogues can consider making a donation to JCLP so that we can continue to put on programs like this and educate people. So I just plant that seed because it's important as well. So I'd like to turn things over to Ann.
Thank you, everyone. I want to echo my thanks to the presenters. Special thank to Noah, who has worked tirelessly to bring these programs to you. And I want to congratulate all of you for persevering whatever challenge Zoom throws at you during this meeting and any other meeting. We will email you all the presentations along with contact information. I know that was requested. And we will start a social forum thread on our website so you can continue the conversation on this topic. You can just Google JCLP and you should hit upon that website. The next President's Forum meeting will be the first of the secular year, Wednesday, January 17th, 2024. The topic will focus on congregations that have sold their buildings and actually relocated to other locations. And our presenters will be from Eastmont, Pennsylvania, Olean, New York, Salisbury, North Carolina, and Waterloo, Iowa. And Noah will send the Zoom link shortly. Please let us know if you have teenagers in grades 10th, 11th, and 12th. The Marcus Foundation is providing $3,000 per child to participate in an Israeli trip experience organized by Route One, whose mission is to help strengthen our teens' Jewish identity and connection with Israel. And we will invite Route One to a meeting so those of you who have teens can hear more about this. Just one final note, we did recently bury our older prayer books and unwanted prayer books in a cemetery. It is a community cemetery, and they agreed to dig a grave for free, which was a lot better than having to dig something ourselves. So wishing everybody a Hag Sukkot Shemer and happy Sukkot holiday. Good night.
Good night.
Thank
Good night,
you all.
everyone.
Good night. God bless.
Good night.